Welcome to Cinema Bites, your go-to for movie recaps in a flash. Big twists, epic moments, all in just minutes. The movie starts with the old fisherman, Gizo, was a man who spent his entire life fishing. Every morning, he would wake up, clean the fish he caught, and go about his daily routine. But today was unlike any other day. While preparing the fish, he suddenly saw a dead fish moving on its own. At first, he thought he was imagining it, but then all the fish in front of him began moving and thrashing as if they had come back to life. Gizo was shocked. He had never seen anything like it in his life. He decided to call his son, Trailer, who worked as a city officer, to come and see this disaster. Trailer arrived in his car, and Gizo quickly showed him the fish still flopping around as if they were alive. Despite his experience, Trailer felt something was very wrong. He decided on the simplest solution. If something cannot be dealt with, it must be burned. But just as he was about to execute his plan, he heard a strange noise coming from the trunk of his car. The trunk was shaking on its own. He cautiously opened it, and that's when the nightmare officially began. A corpse that was supposed to be dead came to life and started attacking him. The zombie was unnaturally fast, leaping at Trailer and trying to overpower him. Luckily, Trailer managed to handle it at the last moment and finish it off. But what he didn't know was that the virus had already spread, and the disaster was far worse than anyone could imagine. Now, a group of survivors had gathered in a temporary shelter on a high bridge. The story began when Trailer, the town's mayor, received a call from the station informing him that his mischievous sons had caused trouble again and ended up in jail, tarnishing his reputation. He went there angry, ready to scold them. However, as soon as he entered the cell, he saw something truly horrifying. One of the prisoners was lying on the ground, writhing in pain and vomiting blood, seemingly dying before his eyes. That moment was enough to turn the world upside down. The poor boy didn't understand what was happening. Suddenly, he found himself on the ground, and the prisoner, who had been on the brink of death, became stronger than anyone in the room, with crazed, ravenous eyes. The entire police force was thrown into a state of fear. Trailer's father tried to protect him from the monster, but the zombie, who had become unnaturally fast, attacked Joseph and bit his shoulder before Trailer could stop him. At that moment, Trailer realized that this was far bigger than just a few problems at the police station. Something strange was infecting people and turning them into monsters. Joseph, his son, had already been infected. The police were all in shock, unable to believe what was happening. Trailer looked at his son and knew time was against them. By then, news had spread about people dying and coming back to attack others everywhere. The city descended into chaos, with everyone trying to escape or find a way to protect themselves. Trailer had one choice. He had to take his children and figure out a solution before they turned like the others. But he knew this wouldn't be easy. He got out of his car, clutching his bleeding arm. Suddenly, he heard a scream coming from inside a house. The man who had been arguing with his wife earlier was now lying on the ground, while she was on top of him, biting him like a wild beast. The man screamed, trying to push her away, but it was clear there was no hope. Trailer stood frozen for a moment, but he had no choice but to act quickly. He pulled out his gun and shot her, ending it before she could finish him off. However, he realized the disaster was much larger than just one or two incidents. The virus had started spreading, and people were turning one after another. At that moment, he received a call over the radio. The hospital where his wife and children were had turned into hell. Patients who had come for treatment were transforming in front of the doctors, and the nurses were fleeing. Those who couldn't escape were also turning. Trailer didn't think twice. He got in his car and sped toward the hospital. The situation grew more terrifying by the second. While driving, Trailer heard frantic calls over the radio. The entire city was in chaos. People were attacking each other. Screams echoed everywhere, and the police couldn't control what was happening. Suddenly, he saw an ambulance stopped on the bridge. When he got closer, he discovered that the paramedic inside was terrified, her eyes filled with fear. As soon as she saw him, she grabbed his gun and shot the driver, who had risen from the dead as if he were no longer human. But the real disaster was inside the ambulance. Joseph, his eldest son, was trapped inside, fighting off a zombie trying to bite him. Trailer shot at the ambulance door to open it, but bad luck was on his side. As soon as the door opened, the zombie lunged. Component placement. The zombie lunged at him with full force and began biting him. Trailer fought with all his strength, but the zombie was relentless. Suddenly, the roar of an engine shook the area. Gizo, the old man who never gave up, appeared, wielding an electric saw, cutting down any zombie in his path without hesitation. Within seconds, he had dismembered the zombie attacking Trailer. From that moment, everyone understood. There was no solution except fire. They all had to be burned. But unfortunately, the city was already lost. Within days, it had transformed from a safe haven into a ghost town filled with zombies. Anyone of Native American descent had immunity to the virus. However, Anyone else was doomed to turn into a zombie. This meant that most of the white population in the city turned into zombies within a few months. Here, Traylor, Joseph's father, decided to build a fortified stronghold for the Native American survivors. One day, Joseph returned from patrol with some survivors. Among them was a man carrying a young girl who didn't look well. It was clear he was hiding something. That's when Lysol, Joseph's younger brother, noticed the bite mark on the girl's neck. "She's been bitten, Joseph!" he shouted. Without a second thought, Lysol shot the man in the head. Joseph, of course, was devastated and tried to calm the situation, but Lysol had already lost his temper. He felt that anyone entering the stronghold could be a threat, and he wasn't willing to take any more chances. It seemed the issue had become more of a personal conflict than a fight against the zombies. The fortress, which was supposed to be a safe haven, was now on the verge of imploding from within, while the zombies outside were knocking on the door, waiting for the right moment. Lysol decided to stage a coup within the tribe, taking control of the place for his people alone. He believed that the others, especially the white survivors, had no right to the protection the stronghold provided. A very dangerous split occurred among the survivors, as some people started to believe his words, thinking that this land belonged to them and that they finally had a chance to govern themselves without anyone's interference. However, Traylor, his father, had a completely different vision. He believed the past was over and that now they had to unite with any survivor they found to face the zombies together. He thought that if they isolated themselves, the day would come when the zombies would break down their doors. A major rift grew between the father and son, with each believing the other was wrong. The greatest disaster happened when Traylor was out on a patrol to gather supplies, and Lysol took the opportunity to prove his theory. The woman they had brought in, unfortunately, she had been bitten by zombies before arriving. Before anyone could do anything, she turned and bit him hard, nearly killing him. Though Lysol survived the bite, he was never the same again. His entire life was destroyed in a moment, and instead of admitting his mistake, he decided to blame Joseph. He began to see everything that happened as Joseph's fault for bringing in those survivors. He believed that if they had let them die, they would have been safe. The situation quickly spiraled out of control. With anger and hatred filling his heart, Lysol pulled out a knife and stabbed Joseph in the stomach without any thought. But the disaster didn't end there. What happened next was far worse. Lysol, completely out of control and blinded by rage, decided to lock the gates and trap everyone inside, planning to kill all the white survivors within the shelter. Joseph, after realizing the knife wound wasn't fatal, quickly moved to find his mother Joss to warn her. Unfortunately, it was too late. The sound of zombies began to echo everywhere, and the entire place was about to collapse. In the midst of the panic, one of the survivors, who refused to believe there was any danger, decided to open the door and escape. The moment he did, a terrifying scream shook the entire place. There was nothing waiting outside except hungry zombies, who attacked him in seconds. At that moment, Traylor and his team finally returned. But as soon as they reached the gate, they noticed it was open and unguarded. They immediately realized the disaster had already occurred. Traylor grabbed the radio and called Joseph. They heard her voice, confirming that the situation inside was literally hell. The team quickly devised a plan. They used cars and blasted music at full volume to draw the zombies away from the entrance. This gave them a chance to enter quickly before the zombies returned. Once inside, they found Joseph and Joss struggling to hold the door shut. The zombies were moments away from breaking through. It was a critical moment. Joss, who had always remained calm under pressure, grabbed a knife and cut off the zombie's arm. The operation was progressing with difficulty, as there were too many people needing evacuation, and everyone was barely making their way to the cars. Suddenly, the shelter door broke open, and a massive horde of zombies attacked. Traylor, always at the front, protecting his wife and son, grabbed his weapon and began shooting at the zombies without hesitation. But instead of decreasing, their numbers grew. Joss, leading the evacuation, kept shouting for everyone to move quickly to the cars, but the chaos was overwhelming. Some survivors fell from the vehicles, only to be attacked by zombies in seconds, with no chance of survival. Traylor, willing to sacrifice anything to save his family, continued to fight alone, trying to hold off the zombies. But their numbers were overwhelming, and they began to overpower him. Even though he was immune to the virus, it wouldn't stop him from being eaten alive in front of his wife and son. He sacrificed his life to save them, and they escaped. Joss and Joseph were screaming, but there was no time to grieve. Joss pulled them quickly, and they escaped the shelter at the last moment. Before they could even process what had happened, someone grabbed Joss by the arm and told them there were 2 more survivors waiting in a nearby church. But it turned out to be a trap set by Lysol, who had completely lost his mind and decided to eliminate anyone who wasn't from their tribe. Joss realized there was no choice but to stop him, even if it meant killing one of his own. Joss gathered his team and moved toward the church, ready to face Lysol one last time. Lysol, still consumed by madness, had prepared a more devious plan than ever before. Instead of confronting Joss and Joseph directly, he decided to attack them at their weakest point, Joseph's wife, Charlie. He blamed her for bringing the white survivors into the shelter in the first place. He opened the car trunk and released a horde of zombies on her, watching as they tore into her in front of him. Unable to bear it any longer, Joss pulled out a gun and shot him, but Lysol had lost all sense of humanity. He didn't care about anything except revenge. Joss fired, but at the same moment the zombies attacked Charlie. Joseph arrived at the last second, fighting the zombies like a madman, but it was too late. Charlie had been bitten fatally. The scene was devastating and unbearable. Furious, Joseph grabbed a knife and stabbed Lysol without hesitation. After everything he had witnessed, Joss knew there was no hope left for this place. He fired shots into the air to attract the zombies, sealing Lysol's fate. In the end, the survivors boarded a small boat and fled toward their original homeland. But Joss decided to stay behind, seeing no reason to continue after losing everything. He said goodbye to the remaining members of his family, drew his sword, and stood in the middle of the horde, ready to face his end like an ancient warrior. On the boat, Charlie gave birth to her baby girl. However, the problem was that the baby wasn't immune to the virus. But to everyone's surprise, the baby inherited the immunity of her father, Joseph. Before Charlie could turn, she made one final request to Joseph, and with a broken heart, he ended her suffering himself. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to get more new videos.